Welcome back to Criminally Human, where the truth has no filter, and where we're not afraid to rip the mask off a narrative that never made sense. Before we begin, let's clear something up. Yes, I'm well aware someone pled guilty to these crimes. In case you missed the title of this video, or just clicked so you could argue in the comments later, let me spell it out for you. We are not talking about Bryan. We are talking about the so-called survivors, and all you sheep who keep throwing around the word trauma. This is about shining light on the ones who actually experienced it, and the ones who have to live with it every single day. So there you go, I just saved you 10 minutes of frowning at your screen while you cook up a stupid comment. Everyone wants to talk about trauma, about survivors, about the two who walked away from that house with their silence and their excuses. But let's be real. Trauma isn't about a spotlight. Trauma isn't about picking and choosing when to speak and when to hide. Trauma is about scars that you don't choose, scars you can't shake, scars that come from being forced to see and live through hell. And while the media props up Ms. Tooth and No Tears as the poster children for victimhood, the reality is, they've had more shine in this story than they deserve. So let's call them what they are. Two people who walked away with selective trauma, while everyone else was left to carry the real weight of this nightmare. Think about the timeline. Hours went by. Hours. During those hours they picked up their phones, but not to dial 911. They called friends. They texted. They waited. And by the time someone finally showed up to make that call, the crime scene had been contaminated, the evidence compromised, and 4 lives were long gone. This isn't trauma. This is selective action, selective silence, and selective storytelling. The narrative we were fed is that they were too frozen in fear to act. But frozen in fear doesn't come with the ability to make phone calls, to invite people over, to go about life in ways that didn't line up with the horror just beyond those walls. Frozen in fear doesn't come with hours of delay. Frozen in fear doesn't come with contradictions that don't add up. Now let's talk about the friends. The ones who answered those calls. Imagine walking into that house, thinking you're showing up to help someone passed out from drinking, only to find your friends slaughtered. That is trauma. That is something you don't walk away from. Those victims were the first to face the carnage, the smell of blood, the silence of death. They weren't given interviews. They weren't given the spotlight. They weren't painted as heroes or victims on primetime TV. They were left with nightmares that will follow them for life. And yet we're told to center the story around Tooth and No Tears, as if their inaction is more deserving of sympathy than the horror others were forced to endure. And what about the first responders? The police who got that 911 call thinking it was a simple case of a drunk student passed out. Imagine that. Rolling up expecting another Friday night routine, only to find a massacre inside. Those officers stepped into a scene no one should ever have to see. Blood on the walls, bodies in beds, silence where laughter should have been. The shock, the guilt, the nightmares, that is trauma. And yet we don't hear their names, we don't hear their stories, because the narrative machine would rather sell us the selective trauma of those who did nothing when it mattered most. Now picture the parents. Families. Getting that call in the middle of the night. Driving across state lines. Being told to come identify your child. Not in a hospital bed with a chance at survival, but in a morgue. Looking down at your son or daughter, lifeless, cold, unrecognizable except for the features only a parent could still see. That is trauma. A trauma deeper than any media soundbite. Deeper than any staged tear or frozen in fear alibi. These parents have to bury their children, then turn on the TV and see the media centering the story on the two who walked away. That's not just salt in the wound. That's betrayal. That's injustice. And let's not forget the community. Moscow, Idaho was supposed to be safe. College town. A place where doors didn't need locks and nights were filled with laughter spilling out of frat houses and campus apartments. That illusion shattered on November 13th. The entire state of Idaho carries this scar now. Students don't feel safe. Parents don't feel safe sending their kids back to school. Communities that once trusted each other now side-eye every stranger. That's trauma on a collective level, the kind of trauma that changes the way an entire town breathes. And yet again, the spotlight shines not on them, but on the two who managed to slip into the role of survivors, without ever truly surviving anything but the truth. So let's call it what it is. Selective trauma. Manufactured victimhood. A narrative that doesn't line up with reality. Tooth and no tears have been given enough shine in this story, more than enough sympathy for actions that didn't match the stakes. Meanwhile, the ones who actually carry the weight, the friends who saw the bodies, the cops who entered the scene, the parents who buried their children, the community that lost its innocence, they're the ones living with the real scars. That's where the trauma is. That's where the story is. And yet the media doesn't want to talk about them, because it's easier to push the image of two young women frozen in fear than to dig into the contradictions and the cover-ups. We're not here for easy narratives. We're not here to swallow whatever the headlines hand us. We're here to question, to challenge, to strip away the lies and expose the truth. And the truth is this: trauma isn't about who the cameras point to. Trauma isn't about who gets the most interviews. Trauma isn't about who the media decides to protect. Trauma is about blood on your hands when you tried to help and couldn't. Trauma is about walking into a house of horrors when you thought you were showing up for something else. Trauma is about identifying your child in a morgue, not crying for a camera. Trauma is about a community that will never feel safe again. So the next time someone tells you that tooth and no tears are the faces of this tragedy, remember the others. Remember the ones who saw the truth, who lived it, who will never be the same. They didn't get the shine, but they carry the scars. And that's what makes them the real survivors of this story. Because here at Criminally Human, we don't play into false narratives. We don't hand out sympathy where it's not earned. We don't mistake silence for trauma or contradictions for courage. We dig deeper, we call it out, and we refuse to let the truth be buried. And if that makes people uncomfortable, good. The truth is supposed to shake you. The truth is supposed to cut through the lies and leave you raw. That's what makes it truth. So while so many of you sheep are blindly following the leaders and swallowing the media's hand-fed story, think about the people who actually deserve grace and empathy. Because it's not tooth or no tears. They've already had more sympathy, GoFundMe dollars, and headlines than anyone else in this tragedy. They want pity, but they don't want people speaking the actual facts. And the truth hurts. Maybe not all 4 lives could have been saved, but if 911 had been called as quickly as phones were used for scrolling, joint breaks outside, popping Advil, and for casual chatter, maybe there would have been more survivors. Real trauma isn't the kind you perform for cameras or the kind that gets you a headline. Real trauma is what those parents live with every single day. Parents who will never again hear their child's voice, smell their hair, or hold them close. That's what I care about. Real trauma belongs to the friends who were tricked into becoming part of a cover story. The ones who walk through that door expecting to help, only to become the first to see the carnage. They didn't sign up for that. They didn't ask to carry those images for the rest of their lives. That's what I care about. The spotlight's been on the wrong people since day one, and the media keeps feeding us a narrative that doesn't add up. So the next time someone screams trauma, remember who actually has to live with it and who just performed it. We as human beings don't always have to agree, but at a certain point we've got to stop excusing the actions of people where pressure needs to be applied. Ask yourself, what if their gender were different? What if their skin color were darker? I'm willing to bet some of you would be pointing out the inconsistencies then. Some of you are proud to be a girl's girl, and that's fine. But what about the ones who are no longer here because of the careless acts of 2 others? Where's the sisterhood and brotherhood for them? And can we please stop calling tooth and no tears young children? They are old enough to vote, old enough to drink, old enough to be charged with a felony. They are not children, they are adults. And adults are accountable for their choices. All jokes aside, it's giving the same energy as when some of you watched the Dahmer documentary and probably felt a moment of sadness like, oh, he was probably just hungry. So understand this. The more you come in my comments defending this foolishness, the more I'm going to post about it. You're not silencing me, you're giving me material. They wanted the spotlight so bad. Well, now they've got it. Not 1 ounce of me feels sorry for them. The moment friends were called before 911 told me everything I needed to know. And guess what? I can't even force a tear out, just like no tears couldn't on that footage. This has been another episode of Criminally Human. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video where we dig into the frat house connection.